Also featured in 24, the U.S. president discussed delivering a decisive final blow to the Islamic Republic regime. Donald Trump, strongly emphasizing an urgent need to resolve the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Iran, underscored his firm commitment to saving the nation's people from the oppressive rule of the mullahs. Iran's threat in response to Washington's economic exclusion operation. The Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council says any country that sides with the U.S. is an enemy. And the worsening petrol crisis in Iran, from long queues to gas station closures. Tehran also broke the year's record for fuel consumption.
From the Iran International Studio, this is 24 with Fardad Farahzad.
Hello and good day to Iran International viewers in Iran and all over the world. With the start of a new phase of U.S. maximum economic pressure against the Islamic Republic, the U.S. president called Iran's economic crisis and the killing of protesters a humanitarian crisis and calls for its immediate halt. Donald Trump also said that all mines in the Strait of Hormuz have been cleared or destroyed. Trump said on Truth Social that the U.S. will force the world to deal the final economic blow to free Iran from the hands of the mullahs.
اسکات بسنت وزیر خزانه‌داری آمریکا هم دقایقی پیش گفت اظهارات مقامات جمهوری اسلامی نشون میده فشار اقتصادی بر تهران در حال اثرگذاریه. اما در واکنش به طرح تازه آمریکا در قبال جمهوری اسلامی، سناتور دموکرات کریس مورفی میگه فشار اقتصادی دولت ترامپ بر ایران به نتیجه نمیرسه و شکست میخوره، چون به گفته او آمریکا نمیتونه مانع ادامه جریان اقتصادی ایران با چین بشه. مورفی همینطور گفته ترامپ در جنگ با ایران به بنبست رسیده و حتی بخشی از طرفدارانش او رو بر سر این جنگ رها کردند. خبرنگارانمون سمیرا قرایی از کاخ سفید و مرضیه حسینی از کنگره آمریکا با ما هستند. سمیرا، آقای ترامپ دوباره حرف از به شکلی سرنگونی جمهوری اسلامی و ملاها میزنه.
That is absolutely correct, regardless of whether the ultimate objective is to dismantle the Islamic Republic or completely clear Iran of the ruling mullahs. A major strategic event unfolded over the past 2 days regarding the Strait of Hormuz. Although former President Trump posted a message on Truth Social early this morning addressing the ongoing Iranian protesters and condemning the regime's harsh crackdown on civil movements, he subsequently delivered a critical update. He publicly revealed that U.S. naval forces officially informed him on Tuesday that they have successfully mineswept and fully cleared the international shipping lane in the Strait of Hormuz, effectively securing this vital maritime transit corridor. Mr. Trump stated that the Islamic Republic of Iran has been issued a stern warning against to lay naval mines in the region once again, highlighting the advanced capabilities of the United States Space Force, a specialized military branch he established during his first presidential term. He emphasized that American surveillance assets are actively monitoring the critical waters of the Strait of Hormuz, centimeter by centimeter. He made it clear that any renewed mining operations will be met with decisive, overwhelming action. Furthermore, he explicitly pointed to Iranian nuclear infrastructure, specifically mentioning Mount Kolongza alongside the 3 strategic facilities struck last summer, affirming they remain firmly locked on their radar. Ultimately, he declared 0% patience and absolute intolerance for any further maritime provocation. And this post comes before we hear the press statement from the Sultanate of Oman and the Islamic Republic regarding the Strait of Hormuz. We know after Busaidi was in Tehran last night when we were talking to each other, I mentioned that Mr. Busaidi is set to head to Tehran. He met with Abbas Arachi. They came out with a joint press statement saying that we have a joint project to do the mineswept operation. They said we want to define a temporary route, and we've held talks so that transit through the Strait of Hormuz can resume. Following that discussion, officials raised the possibility of establishing a permanent maritime transit route for commercial shipping traffic in the region over the long term. However, this proposal directly contradicted previous public statements made by former President Trump. While Mr. Trump emphasized the full completion of a mine-clearing operation, official sources described an ongoing collaborative joint project intended to clear the waters together. Shortly thereafter, Axios published an exclusive report drawing on knowledgeable insider sources, which effectively corroborated Mr. Trump's account of events while offering granular detail into the situation on the ground. This reporting sheds further light on the covert operation initiated months ago to secure safe passage for cargo vessels and oil tankers, a covert maritime transport operation we have analyzed and discussed in extensive detail on multiple previous occasions. In addition, those recent operations were specifically conducted for minesweeping purposes, Fardad. Over the past few weeks, American unmanned surface vessels operating in the deep waters of the Strait of Hormuz successfully identified numerous foreign objects, specifically more than 100 naval mines. Consequently, the Trump administration engaged private maritime defense contractors to execute execute the necessary mine clearing procedures. America's reliance on private firms highlights an ongoing debate regarding its domestic capabilities, given that the U.S. military retired its own specialized minesweeping technology years ago. While questions remain concerning whether these contracted companies are American, British, or based elsewhere, available reports indicate that they have successfully completed this significant security project in the region. And if this project has moved forward and they've completed the minesweeping, first of all, that press statement or any agreement that Oman and the Islamic Republic want to make won't really matter anymore. And another point is that alongside the naval blockade and that southern route through which transfers are taking place, this too can significantly help the United States in the economic exclusion operation they launched yesterday. I mentioned early on that some lawmakers, like Senator Murphy, are talking about how these maximum economic pressures by the U.S. won't get anywhere because China can't be persuaded. There's a great deal of criticism, both here in the U.S. Congress and in the media, and tomorrow the issue was also the naming of this operation. We know economic D-Day politically goes back to World War II, when the Allies landed their troops in France at Normandy, and this belief was created that Mr. Pence was going to suddenly unveil an all-out economic bombing operation, and that didn't happen. At best, people are saying it was a postponed ultimatum that we witnessed. This is something I see a lot here in Congress and the posts they publish, both Republican lawmakers, and Democrats, and basically what happened and why the U.S. couldn't actually use the levers it seems to want to use. Senator Murphy made the point, saying no matter how strong this rhetoric is, the foundation is still ruined, as the saying goes. Referring to the role of the Chinese, we know that exactly on September 24th, a month from now, Mr. Xi Jinping is supposed to travel here to Washington. And why the U.S. couldn't carry out the main thing, which was expected to be sanctioning the central banks and major Chinese banks. They say a big part of it is due to this very visit that's supposed to take place. We know it's the Chinese who are the focal point of these sanctions. It's the Chinese who are said to buy 90% of Iran's oil. And during this time frame, it's the Chinese who are said to have been the main target of these economic campaigns, but not in the current time frame. We know Mr. Pence came to the press conference and said there are a few countries. He didn't name the countries, saying we just gave them some time, and he didn't specify the time either, as to exactly how long of a deadline was given. As a result, there are many critical views that until China cooperates with the U.S. won't be able to actually make this succeed in a way. From the perspective of global markets, they're also very worried. They're really concerned that heavy pressure on China right now regarding sanctions on the Islamic Republic could trigger the de-dollarization process that the Chinese have always threatened. And most importantly, there's the issue of the elections. Tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken, there are exactly 70 days left until the midterm elections here in the U.S. Congress. I saw Senator Murphy, ever since he got up this morning, keeps tweeting like this, telling Democrats now is the time. We need to use this issue of the war to win the election. We know that right now in the U.S., the dollar, or rather gas, is at least $1 more expensive on average compared to before the war started, and Democrats are using this. I saw yesterday 50 Democratic lawmakers here sent a lengthy letter to the White House and the Pentagon, demanding an explanation there from Mr. Hegseth, and they said within 2 weeks, meaning by September 11th, he has to explain exactly why this war, which according to them, this is the exact wording I saw in their letter, why this war that was supposed to last 2 weeks, has lasted 150 days and caused 18 deaths for the U.S., and such a massive price surge, as well as the high cost of over $37 billion. This is the price tag and the cost that the Pentagon itself reports, though we know reports say this war has cost well over $100 billion. And this issue, at the present time, is the main focus here in the U.S. Congress, and the U.S. media are also covering it heavily. With critical upcoming elections right around the corner, observers argue that both Trump and the U.S. State Department deliberately exercised strategic restraint, which explains why those severe sanctions we fully anticipated never actually ended up materializing. And Samira, while Mr. Trump has intensified these maximum sanctions again, it seems that to some extent this corridor, especially the southern part of the Strait of Hormuz, has opened up. He speaks of having cleared all the mines, at least in the international waters section of the strait.
U.S. control of the global oil market is vital, as increased supply manages prices to reinforce economic pressure on Iran. Meanwhile, Axios reports the U.S. has secured alternative transport routes beyond southern Oman's waters. Travel through the pre-war middle route may link to yesterday's Treasury Department press conference. Mr. Bessent announced plans to completely sever the Islamic Republic's foreign currency lifelines, leaving no room to breathe. These actions form key pieces of Mr. Trump's broader strategy to economically isolate the Iranian regime, stripping away all financial support to force them into a point of total leverage. We want third countries to completely eliminate the Islamic Republic's economic bases, front companies, and abused banks. However, despite frequent discussions about removing these financial networks, criticism persists regarding how to effectively accomplish it. How feasible are these? The Islamic Republic has faced decades of pressure, yet recent statements by Pezeshkian and Ghalibaf sparked a huge media reaction. Even Mr. Bessent highlighted their quotes, noting an official admitted it is working.
Thanks to Samira and Marzia.
In Tehran, Iran warned that complying with U.S. economic isolation is an act of war. Meanwhile, Mohammad Bakr Ghalibaf rejected widespread sanctions, stating Iran's trading partners communicated they will not comply with U.S. demands.
Montgomery College political science professor Aram Islami discusses whether the Trump administration's heavy wave of maximum pressure sanctions can truly succeed, given Iran's vast geography and likely lack of full cooperation from China.
Even your reporters highlighted the blind spots of maximum pressure. Threatening to sanction every country dealing with the Islamic Republic requires cooperation from key players like the UAE, China, Russia, India, and Turkey. After 25 years of cumulative sanctions, enforcing them is no longer possible without these countries' agreement. And I mostly think it's a matter of so-called bluster and saving face for Mr. Trump because the military solution didn't work, the political solution, which was that memorandum, didn't work, a mixture of the two also didn't work in a limited way. Right now, it's a matter of economic pressure, but those questions are still being raised. What are these pressures really for? Is the goal regime change or forcing the Islamic Republic to negotiate over the Strait of Hormuz, enriched uranium, and future nuclear programs? To me, this entire discourse of debate is merely confused showmanship born out of desperation. That perspective is reinforced globally, especially as China has openly stepped in and declared these unilateral, one-sided sanctions by the United States to be distinctly illegal. And I don't think as you know, Mr. Trump made a lot of promises. That, well, really the right phrase for it is that he talks a big game. I will create the biggest peace in the Middle East regarding Israel and Palestine and the region's countries. I will end the Ukraine war in 24 hours, and then I will make a deal with Iran that is unprecedented. All of this shows that Mr. Trump has reached a dead end regarding a political solution. As you reporters have mentioned, this dilemma keeps continuing. In Congress, too, not only Democrats, but also the Iranian people view this conflict essentially as a war of choice, meaning a war decided by the Trump administration. There wasn't any real danger for the U.S., and they must find a solution while saving face by claiming they applied more sanctions than anyone else. In practice, however, many unknowns remain, and this path leads nowhere.
Has regime change returned to Mr. Trump's doctrine? Remarks on removing the mullahs and addressing Iranian killings move beyond the nuclear program and the Strait of Hormuz, signaling a shift back to the rhetoric of regime change.
This situation has precedent. Think back to the tariffs involving the US, Canada, Mexico, China, Europe, and the UK. Initially, his talk sounded like a massive threat. However, step by step, he gradually backed down until both sides eventually reached a balanced middle ground, which then, as you can see, the consequences still put the American people, the Canadian people under economic pressure and impact. So bringing up a topic just to get concessions from it, or to force them, or to give off this impression that I'm a deal maker, I'm a trader, and I know what I'm doing, this game, in my opinion, both in Donald Trump's first presidential term and in his second, has gotten pretty worn out, and I think the Islamic Republic, China, even North Korea and Canada too have realized this and won't give in to bullying like this anymore. Unfortunately, brute force and bullying now dictate international affairs. This applies to both Russia and the Islamic Republic. The Islamic Republic explicitly warns that any country participating in these sanctions will be treated as an active enemy, and they will not hesitate to respond. Ultimately, savagery and coercion continue to dominate the global stage.
Could they actually do this before the midterm elections? If economic pressure on Iran worsens, might the Islamic Republic decide to take unilateral action?
Well, you know, it's interesting. The narrative I hear in Washington from think tanks and policy groups and all that is that the Trump administration has washed its hands of expanding this war and wants to step back, knowing this war has no future. So regime change isn't on the agenda, but the Islamic Republic has shown in practice that toward all countries, and the excuse is that since the U.S. is using regional countries, using so-called virtual space for intelligence as well as airspace, and the bases it has to attack Iran or even blockade it, they are considered enemies. So the weapon it has, the leverage it holds, is to actually fuel that economic insecurity and regional instability. And this is a leverage that has worked so far. the Strait of Hormuz too, in terms of economic pressure. The pressure of the possibility that these ships, fleets, might be attacked creates insecurity. So I think they've shown in practice. Otherwise, that memorandum broke down for this very reason, because the US tried to bypass that so-called region it had accepted, and the Islamic Republic knew that if it attacked, that memorandum would basically be off. But it's using that leverage. And I think the Islamic Republic has nothing to lose, because it has separated that internal war it started with the people from the foreign war. And unfortunately, it has caused that internal war started with freedom-seeking people to be pushed to the sidelines. And now you see that crackdowns and arrests have increased, just to show its power inside the country, meaning if the goal of economic sanctions is collapse.
ادامه داره و توی کنگره هم این رو میبینید که نه تنها دموکرات‌ها بلکه مردم ایران این جنگ رو جنگ در واقع انتخابی، یعنی جنگ تصمیم دولت ترامپ میبینن. این در واقع خطر محتمل برای آمریکا وجود نداشته و باعث یه راهکاری پیدا کنن، در ضمن بایستی اون سیف فیس به قول آمریکایی‌ها آبروی رو نگه دارن که ما اکثر تحریمایی که گذاشتیم هیچ کسی نذاشته، ولی در عمل میدونید که نقاط مجهول زیاده. من نمیبینم که این راه به جایی ببره.
In your opinion, has regime change returned to Mr. Trump's doctrine? Because some of the things he says, like getting rid of the mullahs or the complex issue of killings in Iran, aren't about the nuclear program or the Strait of Hormuz anymore. It seems like a rhetoric of regime change again.
Yes, well, this issue has a history. Look, remember regarding tariffs with the US, with Canada, with Mexico, with China, and with Europe, and even with the UK, those tariffs he initially wanted to discuss, he talked in a way that was a huge, massive threat. And then step by step, gradually, bit by bit, he backed down until they reached a point where they hit a balance, which then, as you can see, the consequences still put the American people, the Canadian people under economic pressure and impact. So bringing up a topic just to get concessions from it, or to force them, or to give off this impression that I'm a deal maker, I'm a trader, and I know what I'm doing. This game, in my opinion, both in Donald Trump's first presidential term and in his second, has gotten pretty worn out. I also think the Islamic Republic, China, even North Korea, and Canada too, have realized this and won't give in to bullying like this anymore. Unfortunately, now a sense of savagery, and honestly, I should say brute force or bullying, calls the shots. Furthermore, this power dynamics shift has effectively played out on the international stage. A remarkably similar situation is unfolding regarding Russia, as well as the Islamic Republic. Iranian officials maintained that if any nation, whether explicitly named or not, chooses to participate in these sanctions, they will be classified as an active enemy and targeted directly. This aggressive posture highlights a blatant display of international savagery and relentless geopolitical bullying, demonstrating how far these regimes are willing to go to enforce their agenda globally.
مسئله توحش و زورگویی دیگه الان.
Do you think I might actually do such a thing, especially before the midterm elections? If this pressure on the throat of Iran's economy gets worse and worse, could the Islamic Republic take unilateral action?
Washington policy groups suggest the Trump administration wants to step back from expanding the war and avoid regime change. However, the Islamic Republic views any regional country providing intelligence, airspace, virtual space, or military bases to the US for attacks or blockades against Iran as an enemy, demonstrating in practice that it will target them accordingly. So the weapon it has, the leverage it holds, is to actually fuel that economic insecurity and regional instability, and this is a leverage that has worked so far. The Strait of Hormuz, too, in terms of economic pressure, there is the pressure that the likelihood of these, usually ships and fleets, being attacked creates insecurity. Therefore, I think they showed in practice. If not, that memorandum of understanding broke down precisely because of that.
پایگاهی که داره استفاده میکنه که به ایران حمله کنه یا تا محاصره کنه، اونا دشمن حساب میشن. بنابراین حربه‌ای که داره، اهرم فشار که این داره، این که اون ناامنی اقتصادی و ناامنی منطقه رو در واقع دامن بزنه و این اهرم فشاری است که تا حالا کار کرده. تنگه هرمز هم این نه تنها فشار اقتصادی داره، فشار این که احتمال این که بین این معمولا کشتی‌ها ناوگانا حمله بشه ناامنی رو ایجاد میکنه. بنابراین من فکر میکنم در عمل هم نشون دادن اگر اون تفاهم نامه به خاطر همین به هم خورد که
that it wanted to bypass, so to speak, the area that it had agreed to.
اسلامی هم میدونست که اگه حمله کنه اون تفاهم نامه در حقیقت منتفی میشه، اما داره از اون اهرم فشار استفاده میکنه. من فکر کنم جمهوری اسلامی چیزی برای باخت نداره، چون اون جنگ داخلی رو که با مردم شروع کرده از جنگ خارجی جدا کرده و متاسفانه باعث شده که اون جنگ داخلی رو که با مردم آزادیخواه شروع کرده به حاشیه بره و الان هم میبینید که زد و بندا، زد و دستگیری ها زیادتر شده به خاطر که قدرت خودش رو در کشور نشون بده. یعنی اگر هدف تحریم های اقتصادی فروپاشی.
On the other hand, the Islamic Republic is forced to increase pressures, both domestically and regionally, in order to show its power. I don't know if I answered after all these details or not tomorrow.
I'll leave the judgment of its reservation to our viewers, Mr. Hassami. I also wanted to ask you this. I brought it up with one of the guests yesterday too. Even in the United States itself, even the federal government cannot find all the assets of these drug cartels. After all, these people have complex networks, let alone an established government with thousands of passports and shell companies in dozens or perhaps hundreds of different territories around the world. Therefore, they might really not be able to completely curb these transactions, especially since part of them has also shifted to cryptocurrencies. But one thing that seems to be working very effectively is this naval blockade of the Islamic Republic. And if the Islamic Republic really cannot use the Strait of Hormuz to sell its oil in the coming weeks and months, what will actually happen?
Completely. This issue has really been a multi-year problem, both on the part of the Islamic Republic and on the part of most countries in the region. I mean, if the sanction is actually a blockade, the term that is being used now, if it's like this, well, this is a very big problem. I, however, see the other side of the matter too, and that is just as Iranian experts have been talking about sanction profiteers and war profiteers for years. I think in America too, now we ought to talk about this exact thing, that those who are sanction profiteers and blockade profiteers and war profiteers, also this economic role and economic pressure, and that those elements inside the regime in the Islamic Republic and inside the regime in the Trump administration who are using these so-called sanctions and threats and scolding and so-called blockades, this is a very important factor which you have to see where this works, or whether it even works at all or not in the case of the Islamic Republic. I strongly doubt that this goal is attainable without China's sustained long-term help and strategic cooperation, and by continuous, I certainly do not mean a merely temporary or fleeting gesture. Furthermore, China currently has zero incentive to assist America on this specific matter. Why would it bother cooperating when it is already securing cheap energy supplies directly?
Thank you, Montgomery College political science professor Aram Hassami. One day after the announcement of new U.S. policies to economically isolate the Islamic Republic, the price of the U.S. dollar in Tehran's free market set a new historical record. Currency news websites on Tuesday morning announced the rate of each dollar up to 225,700 tomans, simultaneously with the currency price crisis in Iran. Following an increase in demand for gasoline in the capital, a number of gas stations were closed for several hours. The Tehran regional director of the oil products distribution company said yesterday that more than 26 million liters of gasoline were distributed in the capital. This congestion occurred before the announcement of the details of America's new economic campaign against the Islamic Republic. My colleague Mohammed Mashinshian has joined us from our other studio in Washington. Mohammed, less than 48 hours have passed since the start of this new wave of sanctions, and the currency price is reaching 225,000 tomans and higher. In your opinion, what is in store for Iran's economy?
Undoubtedly, these massive economic pressures will manifest in foreign currency prices very soon. I believe this initial 225,000 toman rate for the US dollar is merely the beginning of a much longer upward trajectory, as recent market shocks have not yet fully registered. Earlier today, Mr. Hemati issued his first official reaction, revealing that authorities injected $500 million in physical cash, paper banknotes, directly into commercial banks and local currency exchange offices in an aggressive effort to force market prices prices out. During the initial trading hours, this heavy cash intervention appeared temporarily successful in pulling down the dollar's value, though experts question whether such artificial stabilization can withstand the underlying economic forces over time. However, this quick fix will not actually resolve the underlying issues. The fundamental reality is that Iran's economy suffers from deep-rooted systemic vulnerabilities that inevitably resurface under pressure. These economic fractures intensify rapidly and reach a critical breaking point whenever the government's reserves of hard foreign currency begin to dry up. Historically, those crucial reserves have depended almost entirely on the nation's ability to export and monetize its oil supply. Now that international sales have ground to a halt and daily extraction has been reduced to absolute bare minimums, the financial fallout is severe. And unfortunately, there is no realistic indication that this precarious situation will improve in either. The way I see it, Washington has built up its resolve, this time not to weaken Iran's economy or to put pressure of the Islamic Republic, but rather, as I understand from Mr. Basant's statements and Mr. Trump's statements, the goal is that they practically want to kick off an economic collapse for Iran's economy. And I think nobody in the world happens to have as much expertise in currency warfare as Scott Bessent, the U.S. Treasury Secretary. And I believe that this new battle that has started, its ultimate goal is to suffocate Iran's foreign currency supply. And I'm saying he has done this before when Mr. Scott Bessent had a private business with the Central Bank of Japan and the Bank of England. And the Central Bank of Iran is just not an opponent on the same level as those previous opponents of his. And it seems, and he knows exactly what he's doing. From the very beginning of the Second War until the present moment, he has actually been entirely successful in managing the exceedingly difficult conditions that the United States has had to endure to keep the broader war going. Furthermore, it is evident that leaders in Washington firmly intend to see this strategic effort through to its ultimate conclusion. Right now, American authorities have directly targeted Iran's regional neighbors. The underlying reason for this shift is that the intricate financial channels that the Islamic Republic built up across neighboring countries were playing a critical role in helping Tehran circumvent barriers to secure vital reserves of much-needed foreign currency. Now, if those channels get closed, the exchange rate will climb at a much faster speed in a much shorter time, and it will soon conquer new boundaries that might not even be imaginable right now.
In that big picture, you're always looking at it from a geopolitical point of view, what the US is doing, how the Islamic Republic responds, how other countries are playing in the middle of this. But when you zoom in on the smaller picture, the reality is that on the ground there are many Iranians, ordinary citizens, who are ultimately paying the cost. It's a rope that on one side the Iranian government's inefficiency is pulling, and on the other side, international sanctions and economic pressures.
I accept this. On the other hand, I believe the government is using this opportunity and looking at these circumstances that have arisen as a historic opportunity to implement a policy that has been around for 7 years now. For 7 years, the government, different administrations, not just Pezeshkian, before that Raisi was supposed to do this, couldn't do it and got extensions, and given the strong lobby it had, managed to get extensions and managed to push back the gasoline price hike. Presently, the Pezeshkian administration is capitalizing on this newly emerged opportunity to deliberately shut down fueling stations across the country, effectively creating an artificial crisis characterized by severe gasoline shortages and artificial scarcity. Officials are attempting to justify these drastic measures by citing ongoing economic constraints and the pressures of the current economic warfare, asserting that national reserves are depleted and that there is simply not enough fuel left to maintain normal daily operations throughout the nation. Furthermore, presenting citizens with a fait accompli, offering them zero alternatives, effectively traps the public into enduring a severe gasoline shortage. Concurrently, they are left with no choice but to accept drastic quota cuts and steep price hikes. This situation highlights the sheer clumsiness of the current administration. Beyond this initial misstep, widespread incompetence, corruption, and systemic inefficiency remain deeply entrenched throughout the governing bodies. causing significant
Farahd,
public
the
distress
main
and
point in
economic
this
strain.
case
However,
is that the
right
U.S.
alongside
Department of the
those
Treasury
individuals,
doesn't
you
view
will
well-bred
find
as just
highly
an
capable
ordinary
people who
company
possess a
active
clear
in energy
strategy.
trading,
From my
but
perspective,
rather
they are
based
masterfully
on
fishing in
information
troubled waters,
published by
expertly seizing
OFAC,
valuable
the U.S.
opportunities
Office
from
of
the
Foreign
surrounding
Assets
chaos
Control.
and leveraging
This
the
group has
current
been
unrest
active in
to achieve
trading
the best
oil,
possible outcomes.
LPG, and petrochemical products,
Thank
meaning
you
commodities in which
Mohammed
the
Machinshian
network
from our other
of
studio
Mohammed
in Washington.
Hossein Shamkhani, son of Ali Shamkhani,
The U.S. Treasury
played a
sanctioned
major
Singapore-based
role in
well-bred
moving
capital
and
selling
affiliates in the UAE, Switzerland, and France over ties to Iran's oil sales network, which Washington says is run by Mohammed Hossein Shamkhani, son of senior official Ali Shamkhani. Well, the U.S. Treasury Department says Mohammed Hossein Shamkhani had set up this company in such a way that on the surface it appeared independent from the Iranian side of his commercial network. That is, an international company with its main center actually in Singapore and operations in various countries. And it stands accused of operating a large network of tankers to transport Iranian and Russian oil. However, according to the United States, at the end of the day, the ultimate responsibility and control over the operations of this group remained with Mohammed Hossein Shamkhani. Wellbred itself wasn't just limited to Singapore either. This corporate group was actually a set of companies operating in the United Arab Emirates and in Switzerland. Based on information published on the company's own website, it also had offices in Saudi Arabia and Nigeria. Now, the U.S. Department of the Treasury is sanctioning the main company in Singapore and its affiliates in the UAE and Switzerland, effectively putting an end to its operations for, well, the activities it was doing for the Islamic Republic. However, the most critical dimension of this case, particularly from a European perspective, concerns the specific activities of the Swiss subsidiary affiliated with the overarching parent group. In 2024, this entity completed the strategic acquisition of an edible oil refinery based in France. According to official findings from the U.S. Department of the Treasury, this substantial commercial investment was primarily intended to preserve regulatory legitimacy while enabling the broader expansion of their footprint within Europe's alternative energy market. Consequently, as part of a targeted enforcement effort, this acquired French enterprise has now formally faced sanctions imposed by the United States. Furthermore, the United States Department of the Treasury revealed that this particular entity actively attempted to project an image of a fully legitimate and standard commercial enterprise by strategically investing in alternative and green energy sectors across Europe. Operating directly within this deceptive framework, the enterprise completed the acquisition of an edible oil business in 2024, a transaction that subsequently triggered targeted U.S. regulatory sanctions. More broadly, officials from the Treasury Department emphasized that Mohammed Hossein Shamkhani's extensive financial network went far beyond standard maritime oil transportation. Instead, it systematically diversified its global reach through strategic acquisitions, shell companies, and high-value investments established across several international jurisdictions, prominently including key European nations such as Switzerland and France, which, according to the United States, Shamkhani actually operates a large network of oil tankers and commercial vessels that would, well, bring Iranian and Russian oil and petroleum products into the global market through this and the money laundering it carried out. A part of which network, as we know, was previously sanctioned by the United States in 2025 and 2026. Thank you, Ali Essenpour from Berlin.
A member of the Iraqi parliament's Finance Committee has warned that if Baghdad does not comply with U.S. sanctions against Tehran, the economic consequences for Iraq could be even greater than for Iran. This Iraqi official said the country's society is not prepared to withstand such pressure. More details from my colleague Turaj Hissai.
The announcement of a new round of U.S. sanctions against the Islamic Republic in Iraq has been met with many reactions regarding its political and economic consequences for Baghdad. Dr. Jamal Kuchar, a member of the Iraqi parliament, said in an exclusive interview with Iran International that this new U.S. sanctions campaign against Tehran could be both a threat and a golden opportunity for Baghdad. According to this member of the Iraqi parliament, Baghdad has no choice but to comply with these sanctions. Otherwise, it will face massive economic pressure from the United States, a pressure that, according to him, will be far greater than Tehran's, because under current conditions, Iraq itself is dependent on the US-influenced financial system. This member of the Iraqi parliament told Iran International that if, in the opportunity ahead, countries like China, Russia, and Pakistan are unable to ease or break US sanctions against the Islamic Republic, then Iraq will be forced to comply with all of these sanctions. On the other hand, he pointed to an opportunity that has arisen for the Iraqi government. According to Jamal Kochar, this sanction campaign against Tehran creates the opportunity for the Iraqi government to reduce its dependence on the Islamic Republic, move toward developing and expanding domestic production, and at the same time, reducing the Islamic Republic's influence will allow reforms in Iraq to become widespread. Reforms that, according to him, will not allow political and military officials of the Islamic Republic to interfere in Iraq's internal affairs after that. This comes as, up until now, none of the official authorities in the Iraqi government or institutions like the central bank and the Ministry of Finance have commented regarding these new sanctions. NASA says astronaut Anil Menon from the agency, alongside Sophie Adano from the European Space Agency, stepped outside the International Space Station to replace a communications antenna. You are seeing live footage from the International Space Station. This antenna that is set to be removed from here enables high-speed data transfer between the station and the Mission Control Center in Houston, Texas. Sophie Adano is the first French woman to perform a spacewalk, and this is her second spacewalk. My colleague Payam Daryabi has joined us from our other studio in Washington. Payam, what is the goal of this spacewalk happening today? Farood, as you mentioned earlier, the space station relies on a specialized high-frequency Ku-band antenna that operates at high frequency ranges, specifically around 12 to 18 gigahertz, which are currently slated for replacement. This critical piece of communication equipment serves a vital purpose. It transfers massive amounts of complex data, high-resolution imagery, and crystal-clear audio feeds through NASA's space-based satellite relay network directly to the ground control station on Earth. Unfortunately, back in 2025, one of these essential antenna units experienced a major breakdown and ceased functioning. Because of this technical failure, 2 astronauts conducted a targeted spacewalk last week in order to safely install a new replacement antenna. However, the primary objectives remained incomplete. Following nearly 6 full hours of grueling spacewalking, the astronauts encountered unresolved complications, prompting NASA to prioritize crew safety and immediately bring them back inside the International Space Station. Consequently, mission controllers rescheduled the additional spacewalk, specifically to install the new antenna during this upcoming window. Once fully operational, this crucial piece of hardware functions by constantly rotating to track and establish high-speed communications with satellites in NASA's tracking and data relay network. This essential link enables the continuous transmission of vital telemetry data, critical scientific research, and high-definition imagery directly from the orbiting station to team members on Earth. Given what you just said, so the antenna has been broken since last year, since 2025. How is this exchange of information between the station and Earth being carried out until now? Look, back when the space station was launched, another antenna just like this one was installed. Back in 2009, NASA decided to install a secondary antenna on the space station, which is actually the exact same one that broke down. Now, during the time this antenna was out of order, antenna number 1, which was the main antenna that had been on the station since its construction, was working. And a really interesting thing is that back in 2009, when NASA decided to install antenna number 2, they sent up a spare antenna as well, which I think on the ELC-3 storage section of the space station, they placed it as a spare. Earlier today, antenna number 2, originally installed back in 2009, experienced a complete mechanical breakdown. Fortunately, crew members were able to immediately replace it with a dedicated spare antenna that had been sent to the station during that exact same initial mission. Overall, NASA's long-term foresight proved remarkably valuable today. It was not a scenario where the unexpected antenna failure left the International Space Station stranded without critical communications. That is because a secondary twin antenna was already actively operational, seamlessly maintaining essential contact with ground control throughout the entire replacement process.
Tell us a bit about the background of these two astronauts as well.
As for Sophie Adenau, who was an emergency medicine she was a French aerospace colonel and in the U.S. Air Force, she has a memory where back in 2014, remarkable career, when Claudia what happened was that he was hired at SpaceX as a dedicated female astronaut serving as she mentioned in her memoirs that I want to be like her, and as they say, the really interesting part is that Neil Menon's wife is also an astronaut named Anna. In addition, there is an engaging documentary on Netflix, so to speak, where a good part of it happens to showcase Neil Menon's own life and career achievements in medicine and space missions.
نکته جالبش این که همسر آنا منون هم اون هم یک فضانوردیه به نام آنا منون و یک مستندی هستش در نتفلیکس که اتفاقا در مورد یه بخشش در مورد زندگی خود آنا منون هستش. در مورد سوفی آدنو هم باید بگم که خب این یک سرهنگ نیروی هوافضای فرانسوی بوده و در کل وقتی که یک خاطره‌ای داره که در سال 2014
I believe it was Claudie Heineri who inspired her. When the pioneering first French female astronaut ventured into space, she later noted in her memoirs, I want to be like her, and, as they say, go to space myself too. What makes this legacy so compelling is that when Sophie Adenau eventually achieved her dream of traveling into space, that inspiring chain of representation continued.
به قول معروف راهپیمایی رو انجام داد کلی بهش یک پیغامی داد که تو وارث منی ولی در این مسیر تو پیشگام هستی.
Overall, and just as you rightly noted, let me also add this important detail. Today marked the 238th spacewalk conducted since the initial construction of the orbital space station. On an individual level, this successful excursion represents Sophie Adenau's second career spacewalk, while for Anil Menon, it officially marks his third spacewalk in total.
Payam, before I let you go, I want to ask you about a related but slightly different topic. What's the deal with this telescope that's set to be installed on Friday? How is it different from previous telescopes, and why has it created so much excitement?
The upcoming Space Telescope launch represents one of humanity's most ambitious astronomical endeavors to date, serving as the spiritual successor to major observatories like the James Webb Space Telescope. What truly sets this groundbreaking mission apart is its primary scientific mandate, conducting the first systematic, dedicated study of dark matter and dark energy throughout the cosmos. To achieve this unprecedented feat, the telescope is engineered with an extraordinarily wide field of view, roughly 100 times larger than that of the iconic Hubble Space Telescope. While Hubble revolutionized our understanding of space with a massive cache of deep field imagery and astronomical data, this new mission's vast coverage area allows it to survey vast cosmic swaths in a fraction of the time. Consequently, researchers expect a quantum leap in planetary science, deep space imaging, and cosmological discovery, promising to reveal extraordinary cosmic wonders that dwarf the contributions of previous generations.
Thank you, my colleague Payam Daryabi from our other studio in Washington. We now have a brief moment to bring you these live images coming to us directly from Hollywood Boulevard in Los Angeles. On your screen right now, you are looking at the sidewalk star dedicated to Dolly Parton, the legendary American country music icon who has passed away at the age of 80. Her family officially confirmed the news earlier today, announcing the loss of this extraordinarily talented and beloved singer, songwriter, and actress. Spanning an illustrious career that lasted for well over 6 decades, Parton transformed the music world with timeless hits, earned roughly 10 Grammy Awards, and cemented her legacy as one of the most recognizable and influential figures in global pop culture, particularly within country music. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's edition of the 24 program. Until tomorrow, when we return with our next Starcast, goodbye.